Bernie Madoff, 70 years old, arrested by the FBI.
His name is synonymous with fraud, and the biggest fraud we've ever seen.
As much as $50 billion is gone, vanished.
The life of this man, just stunning, the extent of the deceit and the lies.
He was stunningly rich. He was the man Wall Street trusted most. A father, philanthropist, financial genius. And yet, behind his soft voice and tailored suits, Bernie Madoff was quietly pulling off the biggest financial scam in human history. But how did he do it? Why did no one stop him? And how did it all come crashing down?
Biggest swindler ever.
He had made up out of thin air these accounts for people.
Who masterminded the largest Ponzi scheme in history is going to spend the rest of his life behind bars.
Bernie Madoff, born on April 29, 1938 in Brooklyn, New York City, to Sylvia Muntner and Ralph Madoff, a plumber and stockbroker, grew up in a modest family. He was the second of 3 children with siblings Sandra Weiner and Peter Madoff. Growing up, Bernie witnessed his father's struggles with finances, which instilled in him a deep appreciation for the fragility of money. This early exposure to financial challenges fueled his determination to never experience poverty himself. This fear of financial insecurity remained a constant companion throughout his life. During his high school years, Bernie met Ruth Alpern and they began dating. Their relationship blossomed, and on November 28, 1959, Bernie married Ruth and they had 2 sons, Mark and Andrew. Just weeks after their wedding in 1960, with a modest initial investment of $5,000, Bernie embarked on his entrepreneurial journey by founding Bernie L. Madoff Investment Securities. He established his business on a small desk in Ruth's father's account firm. Ruth actively participated in the business, assisting with administrative tasks and often handling the checkbook. Determined to make his first business a success, Bernie, known for his sharp wit, charm, and ambition, ventured into the world of trading over-the-counter stocks. At that time, there was a vast market that was largely unknown to most investors. This market was not regulated by a centralized exchange, but operated through a network of dealers and telephone communication. The over-the-counter market encompassed companies that were not considered reputable or were too small to be listed on major exchanges. These companies traded in what were known as the pink sheets. Bernie began to sell and trade these over-the-counter stocks in large quantities, but the prices of these stocks remained unclosed to the public. In the absence of the internet and modern trading apps, Bernie conducted his transactions through phone calls. He would speak to potential investors, discuss the desired number of shares, agree on the price, record the transaction on a piece of paper, and then mail them the certificate. The risks were enormous, and the potential profits were equally massive. Yet Bernie thrived and ran a highly successful business that experienced rapid growth. He then decides to venture off into a small investment advisory business on the side. As a pure investment advisor, he would manage his clients' money by making investments on their behalf and charging them a fee, which was significantly more profitable than commission-based earnings from his investment securities business. Bernie's investment approach was highly risky, with a focus on achieving high returns. Saul Alpern, Bernie's father-in-law, had a clientele of clients he had worked with in his accounting business. He began referring them to Bernie for his side investment advisory business. Bernie eventually gained a group of approximately 20 clients who wanted to do business with him. Saul, instead of setting up individual accounts for each client, decided to pull all their money and hand it to Bernie for investment. Once Bernie generated profits, Saul would allocate the money back to the clients. So essentially, it was an unregulated mutual fund, which is illegal. By law, for managed accounts exceeding around 20 clients, registration with the SEC is mandatory. Bernie failed to register as an investment advisor.
As the Dow Jones Industrials took off on a fear-fed freefall to close down a record 508.32 points.
The stock market had plummeted. The first securities to be severely impacted were the speculative stocks that Bernie had purchased for his clients, which were completely wiped out almost immediately. The loss of money amounted to $30,000, which should have been allocated to his clients. However, instead of acknowledging his poor decisions and the loss of money due to taking excessive risks and ultimately losing it all, Bernie decided to conceal the truth. He was determined not to become a failure like his father had been. He then sought Sal Alpern's assistance in recovering the $30,000 that had been lost as a result of the stock market crash. Saul agrees and gives Bernie $30,000, which Bernie promptly uses to pay back all his investors. Bernie had kept the details of his actions a secret from his clients, which made him appear like a genius to them. As a result, his clients were able to secure returns even during a stock market crash when everyone else was losing significantly. Bernie Madoff decides to buy an office to reflect his growing business. After the stock market crash of 1962, which resulted in a $30,000 cover-up, he shifted to more conservative stocks. As his business expanded, he hired his brother Peter Madoff. While his legitimate business flourished, he continued to operate his private, unregistered business on the side. The arrival of a computer further fueled Bernie's ambition. He sought to trade at high quantities and quickly. Saul Alpern continued to provide clients for his private business, and over time, he hired two accountants, Frank Avellino and Michael Bienes. After Saul Alpern's retirement, the firm was renamed Avellino and Bienes. However, the greed of Frank Avellino and Michael Bienes grew exponentially. They began withdrawing large sums of money from investors and handing them to Bernie to invest. In exchange for raising the funds, they collected a fee. Avellino and Bienes failed to register their business, taking money from clients without disclosing the identity of their investors. The person investing their money was none other than Bernie Madoff himself.
Over the past 24 hours, Lester, let's bring in Stephanie Rule because at the moment, Stephanie, it looks like stocks are surging.
During the 1980s, the market experienced a bull market, resulting in substantial profits for many investors. Bernie's legitimate business also thrived, leading him to become a wealthy individual. He moved to the luxurious Lipstick Building in New York City, purchasing a beautiful office with a stunning view of the city. The office was meticulously maintained and exuded luxury. It made you think someone important worked here. Bernie's image was of utmost importance to him. He portrayed himself as a caring individual who gave generously to charity, paid for his employees' honeymoons, and was known throughout the world of Wall Street as a wealthy and generous person. He was even named chairman of the NASDAQ Composite in 1990. Despite his success with his legitimate business, he continued to conduct his side private business. The location of his side business was right below his legitimate business in the Lipstick Building, but the office was very outdated and dark, giving it a sketchy appearance. You wouldn't have thought a business was being run there. It looked like it had been vacant for years. However, Bernie decided to use this office as his command center. How he conducted his side business was interesting to say the least. He would record his trades on paper even though the computer had already arrived. Why would he do that when he could easily do it on the computer? His clients did not have account access to see how trades were being made. They only received profits from the trades that Bernie was making. Avellino and Bienes continued to funnel a lot of money into Madoff's hands, operating this funneling of money very quietly and under the radar, never putting anything in writing, until one of their subcontractors, who was setting up pool investors and attracting more clients to it, broke their golden rule. They put it in writing. A brochure was brought to the SEC detailing that Avellino and Bienes claimed to be making 100% safe investments and that you were guaranteed to never lose any money, but that was false. When dealing with the stock market, you will always lose money somehow or another. The SEC scrutinized the brochure and raised a red flag, stating that it was impossible to guarantee 100% safety in investments. Consequently, the SEC initiated an investigation, scheduling a meeting with Avellino and Bienes. During the meeting, they discovered that Avellino and Bienes had raised approximately $440 million from small investors. Avellino and Bienes then revealed that all of the trading of the funds had been orchestrated by none other than Bernie Madoff.
The day a founding father of financial hijinks was born in Parma, Italy. Charles Ponzi emigrated to the United States in 19...
After Avellino and Bienes informs the SEC that Bernie orchestrated all the trading of the $440 million, the SEC initiates an investigation into Madoff, seeking answers. This revelation terrifies Madoff because his entire scheme was a fraud. Madoff's Ponzi scheme, an old age fraud, involved paying old investors with new investors' money. As long as more money flowed in, the illusion persisted. He fabricated fake account statements, never investing the funds provided by Avellino and Bienes. Additionally, he created fictitious trades just below his legitimate business. This fraud operation thrived in plain sight. People trusted Madoff because he maintained an exclusive atmosphere. His fund was invite only, and entry required knowing someone. Those who dared to ask too many questions were promptly excluded. The Ponzi scheme continued indefinitely as Madoff needed new investors to pay back existing ones without investing any of his own money. In 1992, the SEC demanded trading documents, prompting Bernie to seek assistance from Frank DePascali. DePascali fabricated fake trade documents, which Madoff presented to the SEC. The SEC believed them and closed the case. The SEC forced Avellino and Bienes to cease operations due to the illegality of their business structure. However, the SEC ordered Bernie to return the $440 million to the investors, but he lacked the funds. In a desperate attempt, Bernie turned to his most loyal and long-standing investors, Jeffrey Pickauer, Carl Shapiro, and Norman Levi. They were able to raise the necessary funds and repay the investors. This raises a question. Have we seen this before? Bernie had amassed substantial wealth over the years and had successfully persuaded his clients. Surprisingly, none of Bernie's customers wanted their money back. Avellino and Bienes was forced to close its business by the SEC, and now Bernie is acquiring the clients that once frequented Avellino and Bienes. Nevertheless, Madoff's schemes continued unabated. He failed to register as an investment advisor, and the fraud persisted for decades. Bernie's legitimate business was starting to lose money. From the outside, people thought Bernie's business was thriving, with its beautiful office in the heart of New York City's Lipstick Building. However, they were mistaken. Bernie faced an overhead problem. He had excessive expenses, and the business wasn't generating enough cash to cover them. What did he do next? He wired $800 million from his Ponzi scheme business to an account in London, then wired the money back in the guise of investments and treasury bills. It was the same concept, just with different amounts of money. Without that significant injection of funds from the Ponzi scheme, his legitimate business would have been shut down. Bernie had a private plane and a house in France, all of which were being used to drain the business's funds. During the time his business was failing, there were numerous attempts to expose Bernie's Ponzi scheme to the SEC. One person in particular, Harry Markopoulos, was particularly adamant and convinced that Bernie had created a Ponzi scheme. Markopoulos alerted the SEC with numerous findings and evidence that it was all a scam. However, the SEC couldn't believe that this legendary figure on Wall Street was operating a Ponzi scheme in plain sight. After numerous attempts to convince the SEC about Bernie's Ponzi scheme, he finally decided to confront them. He called the SEC and marched into their office, demanding to know what they wanted to know. The SEC pressed him, asking where he traded his trades. Bernie then wrote it out in front of them. Then the SEC wanted to check his clearinghouse account. To summarize, anytime a trade was made, there was a record of it in an independent outside entity called DTC. This was a way for regulators or investors to verify that the trades were actually happening. The SEC demands Bernie's account number, and he willingly provides it. Bernie understands that if the SEC actually calls the banks, expecting to find the billions of dollars that are supposedly there but aren't, the fraud will be exposed. He essentially gives the SEC the means to take him down, but they never pursue him. In the summer of 2006, the SEC takes action against Bernie, forcing him to register as an investment advisor. Bernie then uses this as a tactic to obtain more clients and victims. He says, "The SEC has conducted an investigation and found nothing that pertains to fraud, and they have issued me a clean bill of health." In 2006, money began pouring into Madoff's businesses at an unprecedented rate. The total value of the Ponzi scheme had risen to an astonishing $65 billion, and Madoff finally felt like he had achieved his dream. He had vowed to himself that he would never become a failure like his father, and he was determined to succeed at all costs.
The signs were everywhere, but now it's official. We are in a recession. The research group that makes that determination made it today and said the recession actually started a year ago. But the question now, when will it end? Wall Street is clearly...
One of the world's most infamous crashes occurred in 2008, triggering the Great Recession that lasted from late 2007 to mid-2009. It was the most severe downturn since the 1929 Wall Street crash and the Great Depression. The stock market plummeted and investors lost a significant amount of their money. As for Madoff's business, withdrawal notices began to flood in rapidly, but there was no money to fulfill them. Bernie called his largest investor, Fairfield Greenwich, led by Jeffrey Tucker and Walter Knoll, and suggests that this was an ideal time to buy. However, they declined his offer. He then reached out to Sonja Kuhn, making the same proposal, but she also refused. At this point, Bernie was facing approximately $1.5 billion in withdrawal requests, while he only had around $300 million in his bank account. If he attempted to write checks to his clients requesting withdrawals, they would bounce. With the remaining funds, Bernie intended to write checks to his biggest investors, employees, and everyone who had supported him throughout his career. Mark and Andrew become aware of this situation and confronted Bernie about the reason behind his generosity. Bernie just said that it was an early bonus for his employees. Concerned about how they would manage to keep the business afloat in case of any unforeseen circumstances, Mark and Andrew tried to persuade Bernie to reconsider his decision. As Bernie is facing the abyss, wondering how he is going to fix this issue, finally, he caves in. Bernie's mental state at this time was in disarray. Although several people alerted the SEC and other authorities of Bernie Madoff's scheme, it wasn't until he confessed to his sons that he was caught. On December 10, 2008, he confessed the Ponzi scheme to his sons. The following day, the FBI showed up at the Madoff apartment and arrested him. Bernie remained adamant that his sons and his wife were not aware of his scheme. So, how did the biggest scam in history go unnoticed for decades? Because it didn't look like a scam. It looked like success. Madoff weaponized trust, status, and silence. He used the very system meant to protect investors to destroy them. And in doing so, he left behind more than broken portfolios. He shattered lives, faith, and one of the most powerful myths in modern finance, that the system works and someone's always watching.